Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. Got another video for today, and in this one we'll be going to be taking a look at an in-depth preview of the Clarion Artifact, which just recently released as part of Game Update 122. Now with this video, I do apologize for the delay. This video should have been out weeks ago. Normally I try to have the artifact videos out like the same day they hit test, but this one I had rendered the video, recorded it, but then some changes hit test, and I wanted to get more up to date rather than showing you guys something that wasn't finished. So I waited, re-recorded it, and then when I put the footage into Adobe Premiere, there was a render error, and the motivation kind of took a nosedive in terms of wanting to re-record it for a third time. So I've kind of found reasons to procrastinate it, but that wasn't right. I know you guys depend on me for a lot of the artifact previews, so I do apologize for the delay. Won't happen again, and let's get to it. Once again, follow the timestamps if you want to. I know it's a longer video, but kind of touches on each aspect of the actual artifact. So let's dive into it. Okay, so just a quick preview of the different ranks. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but in terms of rank 80, we're still looking at resto-based artifacts. So at the end, all the way up to 200, you get, well, actually at rank 160, you get the 5% resto, and then the only difference between 200, you get the 1% extra precision. You kind of stay at 3% health for 160 and 200 as well, but you do jump up and pretty much double the stats from 160 to 200 in terms of the base stats as well, for up to the 796 precision, which is basically standard for a bunch of artifacts being a 4% prec. But the main difference in the artifact is really just rank 200. Basically all the way from rank 80 to 160, all the bonuses stay pretty similar in terms of the restored melodies, 3.5% all the way through. Instead of 200, it moves to 7. The weapon buff stays at 15% all the way up to 200, which then changes to 30. Clarion's Guard, in terms of its shield buff, is at 0% all the way up to 200, which is at 100% then. And then Arion's Might stays at 0% up to 160, which gets you then to 20 and 6%, and then 40% and 12% at 200. So it's definitely an artifact geared towards rank 200. There are there's different artifacts out there where they're kind of beneficial at 160 or below, where you still get some kind of benefit from it. But this one, in terms of its usefulness, a lot of it is gearing towards rank 200, just because, just in terms of the extra healing, 7% and 30%, it turns out to be a lot. In terms of Clarion's Guard, the shield strength pretty much doubles. So one of the main points of this is actually having that extra shield. Yeah, it's a 30-second proc. You'll see the strength of it, but based on that ability and being able to art swap and basically be able to activate the shield on an art swap, that it is quite beneficial. And then having that shield reduction, is not as beneficial. Then it's basically like a controller shield. And then in terms of the damage, we'll take a look at, you'll see the differences there as well. So it's not a must-have necessarily at 200, but you're missing out on a lot of basically a lot of the key features of the artifact as we can at that lower ranks. So let's get into it here, and we'll show you individually what each section will be like. Okay, so looking at Restored Melody. Using the power of Clarion, executing weapon attacks heals up to 4 nearby players with the lowest health. 7% at rank 200, the other rank's 3.5 of a priority heal. And then if you use a weapon buff, it's 30% to 200, 15% for lower ranks. Now, before I jump to the spreadsheet to show you what those numbers actually mean and look like, let's show it actually in practice here. So I got Shuriken Storm Mastery, Dual Pistol Full Auto, and then just the slower attacks in terms of the dual range taps, just so you can kind of see what the heals look like and overlap slightly in terms of like weapons that'll have faster attacks or more attacks. So we'll get cheated at damages here, hopefully without actually dying. Okay. So it gives an idea there with Brawling Shuriken Storm. This is only the Clarion Guard Restored Melody heals. So now we can jump to full auto spam. And you can kind of see now the heals start to slightly overlap. And if I switch to, actually let's not die first. If I switch to dual range taps, like I'm still getting it pretty much every single weapon attack, it's just that I'm not getting that overlap in those examples just because it's basically it's a slower attack pattern. But not that it would really matter too much, because you can be using flurry shots, or flurry shot will put it in kind of the same category as Shuriken Storm Mastery and dual build full auto spam. But say if you're using like another weapon that's even slower, or you're trying to be melee attacks like one hand or something like that, you can kind of see where it's going to be pretty much on every attack, rather than if I was using dual auto or something like a faster attack pattern, you're going to get those overlap heals just because of the extra attacks. So now let's kind of revive here, and we'll go back and show you the example with the actual weapon buff active in terms of those heals. Okay, so same example. Now we're just going to actually proc the weapon buff here once I take some damage. Oh, without actually dying, please. So we'll proc the weapon buff now, and now you can see that damage with the weapon buff. So much greater heals. Comparatively, I would appreciate not dying. And you can see now, since Pressurize ran out, it's going to drop. So now I'm back to my normal heals. So now I'd have to hit Pressurize again. And now I'm getting those extra 30% heals. Now I'm full anyway. But we'll wait to take some damage here. So same thing, pop my weapon buff. And now I'm getting those 30% of the priority heals now. And 20k heals, that rapid in succession, that's nothing to joke about. So if even I pop in like dual pistol spam for this example. And this is not only just yourself, this is all nearby allies, or the 4 allies that's close to you would be getting these heals as well. Let's see if I can... Oh, that was a bit too close. Ah. The perils of testing by yourself. Alright, that's good enough. And then we'll do pistols. You know, that's a very viable heal. Now Pressurize ran out, so it's going to be dropping in heals. So now I have to hit it again. And then back to the larger heals. So lower heals will take some more damage without actually dying. Either way, you get the idea. You get the idea why it sucks so much to test by yourself. And you get the idea of what the actual heals will look like, and how strong they are. And that's only at, you'll see in the spreadsheet, but that's only at like 81k resto. But it's still a percentage base, so even my resto was 100k. The heals would be larger, but that's only because my resto is that much larger as well. So it gives an idea there. So let's jump to the spreadsheet and kind of look at it a little bit closer. Okay, so in this example, we'll be taking a look at how close you have to be to actually trigger the nearby allies. So my dummy team's getting beat up there. As you can see here, like that's quite a far distance. And he's still getting all the weapon heals. So if I just proc the weapon buff. Let's see if I move over here even farther. Still getting the heals. So it's essentially, you can almost think of it as like a max range heal. And obviously then close, we're going to both get the heals. And now he also gets the shield animation because he's getting healed at full. Now we both do. So we'll kind of show another example as well to see if we can find like the exact max range. Okay, another example here. Let's try this turret way over here. As you can see, He's still getting healed. I'll walk even further away. Still getting healed. So you can pretty much clarify this as a max range shield. I'm almost gray range on the turret, and I'm still getting healed in the background. Let's see, I might be able to get out of line of sight. That's the one thing I haven't tested with this, if the heals are going to be line of sight. Not even the same thing. I mean, there's no raid situation where I'm going to be that far away from my team as a healer. Especially if you got like the Geminis and everything else going on. So you can pretty much guarantee that everyone's going to get it. I'm just not sure about the line of sight. It should follow the rule. Like typical heals, if you're line of sight, then it should follow that rule. So you can see even in the back distance, I'm still getting heals, and he's not even invisible range of me. I can't even, like, I can make out the character, but I can't see, like, I'm not even close enough to see his, like, the league tags or anything. Now I am. So you can see that that's the pretty much the drop off to see the league tags. And he's still gonna. Oh, is he not getting heals now? No, now he wasn't. So yeah, that's pretty much the range. Or is it line of sight now? Or it is ran out of things to hit. Yeah, so it's pretty much the render distance, similar to like celestial healers. That's the distance of your healing, is the render distance of your actual character. So there's no worry about when you see the facts in Clarion where it says nearby allies. You don't have to worry about, say, like electric, where the heals have to be pretty much right beside each other, or even like if you're thinking of like the I don't have the mod on, but the 8 proc heal. I think it's like healing conversion or something like that, where you basically have to be right beside the target to actually get the heals, which is not the case. So it gives an example of the range. Actually, I might be able to see if I can get even farther away now that he's getting attacked still. Yeah, as you can see, he's still getting heals from range. Even though it's basically just still beyond the render distance. No league tag showing, still getting heals. So nearby is quite a subjective term in this case, but all the better. So let's jump into another example. Okay, so taking a look at the heal aspect of it. So I did a sample size of 30 heals just to kind of give us an idea of priority heal base. Now I did include the criticals in there, and in general, just like there is with damage, healing is the same way where there's a healing range. So that's why you're going to see like a crit from like 98 all the way crit up to 103. You're going to see base heal, base priorities for like 37 all the way down to like 34, 35. So there's going to be a pretty large range in this, and that's why it's not going to give like exact results. But taking a look at it here, my base restoration and dominance, purple healing ray, transformation, and Clarion. Now I should mention as well, purple healing ray, the healing from Clarion, Restorative Melody, is not going to count towards purple healing ray because it's not actually you doing the heals. It's Clarion healing you and Clarion healing the allies. So it's how it's coded in the combat log. So it's not going to count towards those heals because you aren't actually doing it. You are not healing. The artifact is. So that should be mentioned as well. But I still feel like even in combination, purple healing ray is still going to be a pretty good combination of artifact wise, because Page of Destiny is really only required in like some elite raids or critical runs, stuff like that. Page of Destiny, a lot of it, the rescue heal is overkill. So I feel purple healing ray for the power consumption is more generalized, or if you're doing like gem spam, then you just drop it entirely. But in terms of this here, so after the average, we had a 50k average and a priority heal, and then the 7% Clarion heal for Restorative Melody at rank 200 worked out to be 7.5%. So basically, the 3833 was 7.5% of 50,666. So that's close enough to the 7. Like I said before, the healing ranges, the crit bias, everything else is going to play a factor in that. Now, when it was empowered by your weapon buff, as you can see here, those 20k heals are nice. Like this, the 81k resto, that's on the low side. Somebody can comment in the comment section, leave a note below what kind of like the top resto now is nowadays. I don't really follow the healing stats. I know for sure I wasn't wearing like augment buff because I didn't want the augment buff to play a factor. I think my origin augments, adaptive augments were all might. So with that being said, I'm sure I could get my resto around 100k, I'm guessing. But let me know just exactly what the results are. But as you can see, even at the 80k, having all these 20k crits is going to be quite beneficial. And even then, it worked out, the averages be 28.1%. So that's still not bad at all. So for example, if I just calculate one of them here, just to show you kind of a difference. So it's like, say if I take this one that's a 7543, and we'll divide that by... we'll pick one of the ones from the other side, 34,866. That works out to be about 22%. So the same thing, it's not 30%, but it's close. And then you've got the, once again, you've got the crit buys, you've got the healing ranges taking a factor in there. But as you can see, it's working as intended, as you're almost nearly entirely getting that 30% extra. Or if it's lower, then it's going to be 3.5 or 15%. So it's definitely beneficial for healing. And then we'll jump in and take a look at the shield next. Okay, so let's take a look at the shield aspect of it, Clarion's Guard. When you're empowered by a weapon buff, targets above 95% health, healed by Restored Melody, receive a shield for 12 seconds. The shield effectiveness is increased by 100% at rank 200, which is what this example will be, but I also have the stats at 160 below when I show you the spreadsheet in a moment. Players can only benefit from this once every 30 seconds. Now the shield itself will only apply to 4 extra players. It's not an 8-man shield, but you'll see the strength here in a moment. And to be able to apply it, you yourself have to be above 95% health as well. So if you're above 95% health and the targets are above 95% health, then you get the shield. I'll show an example kind of in the sparring room, just with extra 4 players. It's kind of hard to generate that in the test server, but I have some 3 dummy counts I can use. Now testing, the purpose of this is just to show you the base shield multiplier. It got a little bit more trickier to test this after the House of Legends update because you can't do it in instances anymore because you're buffed. So right now I am in Metropolis Historic District beyond our Kilo Bounty. So my default defense is 299, can't get lower than that. I'm sitting at 24,694 and 33,85 Resto and Dominance respectively, which I'll show you in the base shield multiplier formula. So now I have to go get our Kilo without getting hit by anyone else. Proc the weapon buff, get hit. And then, sorry, we can go to, I didn't show that too well, logs there. So we're going to take that damage that I just took from our Kilo, and we'll plug it into the formulas just to confirm the results that I've shown you in the Excel documents, just so you can kind of see them in real time as well. So let's jump over the spreadsheets now. Okay, and just to kind of give you a brief idea what this will look like applying the shield to the group, I logged my 3 other accounts, which is quite the juggling act. I have 4 different launch pads up at the same time. But so we're taking a look at Clarion's Guard. So as long as I'm above 95% health, when I cast it, it's going to extend to up to 4 players. So we're going to do Pressurize, tap it, and you can see myself and the 3 others have a shield. Now, the actual animation, it's not because I'm water they get Tempest Guard. This is kind of like a placeholder FX until the developers change it. So that it will have a different design, probably like in a future game update. But it's not always going to be Tempest Guard. So say, for example, if I switched like electric. Actually, just so you guys can actually just see that then. Let me just go quickly like electricity. And same thing, we'll do it with wired. I'm going to have to make sure we wait 30 seconds because they're not going to get the shield. Not sure if it's actually been 30 seconds yet. We'll take a look. So wired. I've got the shield, Tempest Guard animation per se, but as you can see I'm electricity, so it wasn't just because I was water. So that's how the shield works in like a group setting kind of format. Now, I have heard it's a bit buggy in terms of, say, it's a group of 8 people, So it's only going to be 4 players, but it seems to always want to apply to the same 4 players. I have heard those reports. I can't actually confirm it because I don't have an extra 4 or 5 launch pads to do. I mean, I could create 4 or 5 extra accounts, but that's quite the juggling act if I was going to do that. But maybe someone who's used it in a raid can confirm that or not. But I have heard it's a bit buggy in terms of which players it selects to use. But it's still only going to cover 4 regardless. Okay, so just an example, you saw me just take that damage. So if we do 57,109, just to kind of show you how the formula works, 57,109, 15,142 gets to 72,251 of the total damage absorbed. Now if I divide that by my base shield multiplier, 32,858.25 gives me a final one of 2.198, which is 2.2 rounded up of what I got for the other ones. So that's just showing you how the results kind of work in real time. So in turn, it was the exact same as a DPS stance and healer stance at rank 200. Now rank 160, 120, 80 below, where you don't have the extra 100% effectiveness, it's only going to be 1.26. So in terms of how that actually applies to the formula, so 2.2 puts us above redirected rage, which is interesting there in terms of tank stance. Now it puts us above like Boon of Souls, all the healer shields, all the controller shields, some of the controller group shields, but puts us below like Winter Ward, Hard Light Shield, etc. and all the healer supercharges. So 2.2 is nothing to shake your stick at, especially because it also works in DPS stance. Now there are certain drawbacks, of course. You have to be above 95% health to proc it, so it's not like you can always depend on proccing it. It's going to depend on that circumstance of being of the required health. And then you can only proc it every 30 seconds. So it's a 30-second shield, where some of these other shields are not 30 seconds. They're 18 or 12-second cooldowns. So in terms of that the strength is reasonable because it's not always a guaranteed proc. And then 1.26 does put it still above the controller shields, puts it above reflection, but less than density. So, I mean, it's one of those things where a 1.26 shield's not going to be really that helpful, especially with how, I wouldn't say difficult, but how extra it is to proc it. It's not something you can just pop and forget like a regular shield. You have to make sure that you kind of meet the qualifications or meet the right scenario. So 1.26 is not that great, especially if it's going to be only every 30 seconds, where, when you think of it, like reflection is a 12-second shield, and some of these other ones are either 12 or 18 seconds as well, and this is a 30-second shield, 1.26. So it's one of the things where, once again, it's going to be much better at rank 200, where a 2.20 shield for yourself and 3 other players is going to be helpful. So that's where it sits on the ranking. Let's take a look at the damage testing. 40% at rank 200, and 12% of your precision, 12% at 200, as damage to all enemies near target foe for 6 seconds. Now, so don't pay attention to the numbers themselves. My restoration is low. I'm not spec'd into precision, my augments or might, etc. So it's not. I'm not showing you the maximum potential of how much damage you can do. I'm in terms of I want to show you the baseline percentages of the damage increase and what it actually looks like. So, for example, here, easiest to show it is I'm just using dual flurry shot. I've got the artifact equipped. So if I use my weapon buff, you'll see every 6 seconds I'm going to apply damage to all my other targets around it. So you see all that extra damage, where a normal flurry shot would be purely single target. And you see they're all, like if I go to my logs here, it'll show Clarion hit my sparring target, for 8770. So I'm getting all that's basically entirely free damage. Now if I go to single target wise, this is why it's a little bit not as effective on bosses. But you'll see here, if I apply the weapon buff now, you can see 1 extra tick for about 35k is right there. So the Clarion damage sparring target for 35k. So that means, if you're using this on single target as a healer for damage wise, you're looking at 1 large tick, but there's obviously no ads. So if there was like a boss fight with ads, or if you're just using flurry shot in the hallways, you'd be hitting it. But obviously, if you're using like Brawling Shuriken Storm, you get that AoE aspect of it, and all the extra hits. So that's essentially the concept behind it. And I mean, all it is just your weapon buff. So yes, it's gonna you're gonna have to slightly change your loadouts for some of the healer power sets, just because you're gonna have to run a weapon buff. So this might change in terms of running. You're not running like Souls of the Seas. You may not run a group heal, depending if you're running like Purple Healing Ray, etc. Or any artifact setup. So yes, you do have to find a loadout slot for the weapon buff, but that's it. In terms of that, you're just looking into your spec. You can kind of basically play around with what you're going to need to spec precision, how much resto you can take, etc. So with that, you're going to play around with the balance in terms of how much resto, how much precision you want to take. Or if you're doing older content, obviously you can take more precision. But taking a look at the actual damage increase, we'll show you here on the spreadsheets. Okay, so looking at the results here, once again, I'm not, the purpose of this test wasn't to show how high I could parse. It was basically to show the percentage increase in terms of a baseline test. So basically what I did was I tested with no weapon buff and no artifact. So basically just my precision stayed the exact same throughout. And I just did 6 parses of 30 seconds, which brought me to almost 3.8 mil. Then I did a baseline test with just the weapon buff, and I did not have the artifact on. And didn't use the proc. That had me, so just using the weapon buff with AoE Brawling Precision was 4.7 mil. And then I did the exact same test now with the weapon buff and the artifact, and brought me to 5.7 mil. With the crits all staying about the same percentage, 24% crit rate, 26, 24. I mean, that's all within the realm of reason. 631 crits, 649, 636. I mean, that's nothing too much outlier-wise. So what does that mean? So my baseline was 3.7 with the weapon buff just regularly without any artifact. I had 4.7 and then 5.7 with the extra artifact Brock. So I had a 25% increase over my baseline. So basically just using the weapon buff Pressurize, I had a 25% increase in damage. And then if I used the artifact, on top of that, I had an extra 21% damage increase. And then total, the difference from my baseline damage to using the weapon buff and the artifact was about, that's 51% or so. So you can see it's still a massive increase compared to, say what we had before with like Demon Fang, where it was just like, hardly even worth it. Where this one does give relevancy to a battle healer build, because really you're not doing anything different. You're still clipping your powers between like Brawling Shuriken Storms or dual flurry shots, depending on whatever you're doing. And you're basically just getting free damage. There's nothing you have to do. Every 6 seconds it's going to proc as long as you keep your weapon buff up, which is just every 12 seconds. So it gives you another clipping power every 12 seconds. You do lose one move, so maybe you can't run like 3 supercharges for like a Gemini spam build, but then if you're shooting a Gemini spam build, you wouldn't really be a battle healer anyway. So you do have to find basically one power to drop to run a weapon buff, but that's it. Other than that, there's no other sacrifice. Because you're still getting the passive 8-man heals, or whatever, the entire group, with the Restorative Melody. So you're still getting all these healer results from it. You're still getting the shield itself when you're above 95% health. And then now you're getting this free damage aspect of it, which is basically, a 21% increase on top of just using a weapon buff. So it's a very large percentage. It's almost double the damage, considering from the baseline damage to the weapon buff. Now, this is going to be different if you use like Flurry Shot or like a boss fight, because obviously you don't have those like 5 targets where you're only going to have 1 target, or you could have 8 targets. But basically just goes to show you that it is a viable damage increase using this. Now, in terms of this, is it going to make you a better healer? No. I mean, you can still heal way more yourself without having Restorative Melody and running like, Transformation, Page of Destiny, Purple Healing Ray, or either Gemini, whatever. You're still going to have more healing out without this combination. But if you did want to run this to be like a battle healer and do maybe explore a different kind of spec, because at the same time, you do have this, you're running a hybrid spec for this. You can't run, technically you could run a weapon buff, but at the weapon percentage to increase the damage a little bit more, but then you're losing out some extra stats. And then obviously you're still going to be hitting powers too, so your power is going to drop like a rock. That's why it's much better for a hybrid setup, because then you have the power return from using powers and your weapons, because you're still doing both. So this is where it is. So it's, in terms of like a summary, it does make it viable. You're not going to be something like DPS God or something as a healer. It just means that healers right now have no there's nothing a healer can do to produce any kind of valuable damage in a raid. There's really nothing they can do unless they want to throw like damage consumables or qual bombs. But at least now with this artifact, it does present the opportunity for them to do some damage without actually impacting them as a healer. So let's kind of touch on this as a tanking example, and then we'll wrap up my final thoughts. So taking a look from Clarion from a tanking perspective, it does add a kind of a unique playability to it, especially for, I would say, personally, it would be fire and ice. Ice, it gives a whole new aspect of in terms of like self-heals, where normally you wouldn't have that. You just have like the mystic heals. Right now, for the case of this, I don't have Refractor on, just so you can see, or sorry, I have Refractor on, not Mystic, just so you can actually see the heals coming from Restorative Melody. But you can always run both, or I can show an example with both. But for example, with Ice, it really doesn't impact the playstyle that much having him to run Ice Bash. Because I still have an Inescapable Storm for my range AoE pulls. I still have a Resonant Gale for my juggles. I still have Reflect, Winter Ward, and Hardlight Shield for my shields. I'm just dropping a Supercharge, which basically I don't really run much as Ice anyway. I'd run like Amazon Deflection. And you don't really need Amazon Deflection for everything as well. So it really doesn't impact you much as an ice tank at all. Maybe for like some critical elite runs and stuff like that, then yeah, you'd want something different. But I mean, it's not like you're trying to battle tank in those anyway, or basically try to survive. So right now, my DPS, like I'm in DPS gear. I don't have any like resto specs. Like I'm not trying to do like a survivability build here. So that's why when you see these heals, the same thing, I would kind of start the fight normally. She's probably going to teleport away to me. I got to take some damage first. And you're going to have to change your weapon style a bit. Like for me, you may have to do like martial arts as well. Because, I mean, if you use one-handed, the issue is that then you might get caught in the like lunge and start giving blues. So that's the one thing you have to give access to. But I can clip the shield, get the extra heals there from the taps, same thing. If I had to juggle or give up blues myself. But you can see those examples that I'm getting, those 17, when Ice Bash is active and I'm getting those almost 17, 18k heals, if I'm getting that consistently, that makes a large difference. And then now we can kind of put, we can run Mystic as well, just to kind of see like double examples. You can still run Manacles no matter what. So you do have the, at least, how you'd run it. Yes, my shields are still a little bit too strong. I'm gonna take some damage first. And now you're seeing the heals with Mystic and the artifact as well. So I'm getting the extra resto. Now it's 20k heals. So even like fully spec'd out, I mean, if you're going to get towards like on the higher end of skill points wise and getting those 30k heals if you get enough resto or you're buffed or whatever, I mean that's huge. Especially as ice. It makes like a solo ice build like much more completely viable. You just have to find kind of like a comfortable weapon style. Because like I said before, I mean, my hand is one-handed usage, but really with one-handed, the only kind of options you get is Flurry, which isn't going to work as well. You're probably going to end up giving a lot of blues, especially if you try to clip it. They can block after the fact, but at least with martial arts, you can just do the quick little taps, get some heals from there, or if you need to, once you block break them and knock them down, you've got the extra heals from Martial Flurry. So, I mean, she's not really going to do enough damage to kind of get me there. But, I mean, you understand the concept of it. Let's see if I can take some more damage here. Yeah, so now I'm going to have Mystic and heal as well. Normally what I have no self-heals is Ice. Where now I have all that flexibility. So it's not going to work in every situation, but I mean, there's going to be a lot of times where and I'm almost going to heal myself back up, just myself. So it turns ice into a more practical tank where you have these self heals to kind of play around with, without really much impact to the playstyle. Because I mean, as ice, I wouldn't really run either Gemini. If I had to, I'd run dash attack or something. But that's just for elite. Or I'd run like Amazon Deflection. You don't need, I mean, Refractor is overkill for ice. You're not going to need that for survivability. So you could easily run Mystic, Manacles, and Clarion for like probably 90% of content as ice. And if you get your build up there with those stats, you're going to be getting back like 30 to 40k heals on crits. So it makes it very viable. So I want to just try kind of like a fire example as well here, just to kind of show you if I can even take enough damage to proc it. Okay, so as a fire example, I went a little bit more into the resto as fire. I don't really have enough to go crazy, but my thought is that doing a full resto build, actually now with the Clarion, makes like a fire self-heal build completely viable. Like you don't have to run a shield build, you can go like full resto, because not only can you keep yourself back at full and kind of proc the shield, because I didn't really mention the actual Clarion's guard with in my ice example. But for example, if I jump into this, I'm already at full health. I can just sit here with fire. So for fire example, I'm using a Clarion, Mystic, and Manacles. Manacles isn't 100% mandatory for fire, so once again, it's not a complete issue. And the same thing, I can hit fire weapon and stoke flames, clip that each time. I've got my backdraft, so I'm still got the extra heals from that. I got burden termination I can run. It's the same thing. I'm at full health. Now I'm going to proc fire weapon and go into it. And now I just gave myself the Clarion guard shield too. So I buy myself a shield every 30 seconds because I can easily keep my health at 95% as a fire. Like I can just either do like a soda or a backdraft clip or whatever. Like I can keep myself up there. But I'm benefiting. Now I'm getting those 34k crits, and my resto could certainly still be higher. And I can still basically play around with it. So it's just, I'm going to give myself a shield. I can give others around me a shield. So it's a build I want to try. So I'm not going to go like too in depth on it now, but I'm fire tank on live server, and I'm gonna get this Clarion Artifact and see if I can do like a full like resto to the max fire, like resto augments, origin adaptive, resto like soders, resto primary spec as well. So obviously higher skill points are going to be beneficial here because I can still run the resto in health. But this is where I was actually looking for this artifact to actually be viable with. Is that I can now have died there sitting in the wind, but either way, it's just, this is what I'm most interested in is using the Clarion, not as much as a battle heal artifact, but to supplement a tank artifact. Because you don't need, like, if I'm running, like, if I'm doing critical or something like that, I can be like a full kind of survivor health tank, but a lot of that is kind of overkill. Like, you still want to have kind of fun with the fire build. You don't have to do like the hardcore spec with like everyman prototype and everything else all the time. But it's much more beneficial. I'm sure there's damage builds you could work out with like staff or something like that. Like I was just using martial arts. I'm not focusing on like a battle tank build per se, but yeah, it's at the same aspect. You would still be getting that extra damage, so you'd help out a little bit from that. But I'm focusing more on enhancing those tanking. So it's not going to help rage or atomic or anything like that, because it would help rage, but at the same time it's pointless because you're going to heal back it anyway. It's not going to help atomic. Earth, it's not going to heal allies, so it doesn't. They changed that, so it's more. It can still technically work for Earth. Earth is a little bit more trickier because if you're running a brick build, you got 2 slots anyway for brick and the totem summon and fortify goal. Just dropped my mind there for a second. So it's a little bit trickier to run a weapon buff on like an Earth build because you've already got things set aside for that. Maybe on like an Aftershocks build, but for like a fire tank, it's really plausible and ice because you're not really running supercharges anyway, or you're running Amazon Deflection. Like it really does not hurt my fire load at all. Even if I didn't want to run, in a pure resto build, it made sense to run burning termination. But if I didn't want to do that, I could still run like a supercharge, like dash attack or anything I wanted, because I need engulf, I need backdraft, I need stoke, and fire weapon, and hard lead shield. and you can run emulation or whatever as well. So if I could do that, I could certainly run this build, keep hard lead shield, I can run a supercharge, whatever. So it's ice and fire, a lot of flexibility for the Clarion Artifact, and that's what I want to do more like a focus build on. So look forward to that video in the future. But it's certainly interesting. So let's kind of touch on my final thoughts here. I know I've kind of talked about some of my summary final thoughts here throughout the video. Okay, so we come full circle. You find me outside of John Constantine again, so it's going to look really weird if you skip from the beginning of the video to this video, because there's about 42 minutes in between showing you all the stats if you kind of skip to my final thoughts. But for the Clarion, this artifact, is it one of those artifacts where it's you must have it? Is it meta changing? No, it's not going to be that. If you want to, I've had so many people ask across my videos if they want like a battle healer build, or what would they do with a battle healer. Yes, if you really want to focus on battle healing, or if that's something that interests you, then yes, this is a must-have for you. Demon's Fang is useless. This Clarion Artifact does actually present a viable damage increase, depending how your spec is. And it's easy enough to make room for a weapon buff on a healer build. It just may impact like a gem spam build, but you're not really being a battle healer if you're focusing on spamming 3 supercharges anyway for gem spam. But it is a very viable damage increase artifact. Now, in terms of thinking it from like the tank's perspective, that one, I do want to say my full summary is TBD, because I do want to cover that in a separate video as a fire tank on live servers, so I can actually see it in like elite raids and a build. But I do think it has a lot of potential for a tanking artifact. Not so much for rage and atomic, doesn't need it, nor it's quite awkward anyway. But for ice and fire, it's very viable. Ice tanks gives it a very viable self-heal build, along with a Mystic Symbol of the 7 artifact. So if you're like a solo player or soloing bounties, or even doing like lower raids where the healer's not as good, it's very viable for ice. If you're going to be using it in like critical elite, doubtful, because you don't need it. You have healers to focus on that. You'd want to take a full shield build. But for fire, I think this is going to make fire a full resto build very viable. I have tried full resto builds in the past, like during like Shatter Gotham, and it just didn't, like the fire heals were too slow. So they were just slow enough that it didn't help you. Where I think now with this Clarion's Guard, in terms of everything else we have going for it, depending on what weapon, I think it's going to be very viable in terms of making a full resto spec for fire more viable than, say, running like a shield build. So running like all the self heals. So especially when with the type of resto you can get on live server if you have the proper spec and buffs. So that's my opinion there. It's certainly an artifact I would consider leveling. Not so much even for the battle heal aspect. You do get an extra shield. I mean, you can tax swap it with artifacts and have that shield proc. So it's definitely, would I put this artifact in the meta? No, like I said before. But it's certainly an artifact I would consider leveling. Now, it's really only useful at 200. You can use it obviously below 200, but the viable increase in terms of its damage, in terms of the shield strength, in terms of the priority, like the actual healing, there is a very large difference between 160 and 200. So it's one of those things we may want to save to or kind of work towards, or say wait for next sale and then get the Clarion's Guard up. I'll be leveling it up to 200 myself, so it's not something that I'm just going to kind of like talk the talk. I'm actually going to walk the walk with it as well and run it. But yeah, it's just definitely you want to focus on this one at 200 rather than 160 or below. It's just that you're missing out on a lot of the features. So take care, guys. Once again, any questions, put them in the comment section below, and we'll see you in the next video.